Hello, welcome back to the Jewel Ornament of Liberation from Gampopa. So today we will going to give a summary of the 5th chapter, the Suffering of Samsara. The suffering of samsara is one of the four turning of mind, which is very important subject. Here the Gampopa said, so most of the time we have this attachment toward the pleasure of the samsara. So especially the human realm and the God realm. So there are suffering, but not that much suffering. And there are also so much pleasure, especially in the God realm. And we also have in human realm, we also have a pleasure. And sometimes we are kind of forgetting the suffering of samsara. So I think here it's important, the Gampopa said, this antidote to this attitude. What kind of attitude? Thinking or believing that I will have this pleasure forever. I mean, that human life or God realm. If you're listening from the God realm, so we never know. Maybe nowadays the God realm, they also have the internet and Wi-Fi and all the mobile and YouTube. We never know. So if you are watching from the God realm, so here Gampopa said it's impermanence, and so there are many other realms like hungry ghost realm, like hell realm, animal realm, and there are, so those are the lower realm. So there are lots of suffering, so this antidote to this kind of attitude or attachment toward the samsara's pleasure, so one should meditate on the faults of samsara. So that's very important. The faults of samsara is the problem of samsara, or the suffering of samsara to meditate on, contemplate on. So here Gampopa, in the 5th chapter of Jewel Ornament, Gampopa emphasized on the 3 types of suffering. In Tibetan, we call it 𝘓𝘬𝘠𝘬𝘯𝘵. In English, all pervasive suffering. And the second suffering is 𝘓𝘪𝑣𝑒𝑑𝑢𝑛𝑔𝑎𝑙. In English, the suffering of change. In Tibetan, the third one is 𝘓𝘪𝑔𝑖𝑑𝑢𝑛𝑔𝑎𝑙. In English, the suffering of suffering. So these are the 3 type of suffering which the sentient beings in the 6th realm we experience. So it's quite difficult to many people to understand these 3 type of suffering. The first suffering is very difficult to understand, that the suffering, all pervasive suffering, 𝘓𝘬𝑗𝑔𝑖𝑑𝑢𝑛𝑔𝑎𝑙, or sometimes we call 𝘓𝑎𝑏𝑒𝑑𝑢𝑛𝑔𝑎𝑙. So now, for example, this very moment, let's assume you are not going through very high emotion, very pleasure, happiness, joy, let's assume you are not going through this, and me neither. And let's assume you and I are not going through some great suffering. So let's say right now we are having a neutral experience, which means having that ego. Like, do you feel like I am watching this video? There is this I, the sense of I, the duality. I am watching that. So the subjective I and objective that. So there's this duality, and there is this possessor of this five skandha, the my body, my mind, my feeling, my perception, my experience. Do you see that? There's a possessor of this, all the five skandhas. So that ego, as soon as the ego is there, and that we could say the root of the suffering or the cause of the suffering is always there. That's why we call it all pervasive suffering, which is the root or the foundation or the cause of all the suffering, the ego, ignorance. Let's say right now you are so much in joy, maybe something really good thing happening, or you are having ice cream, or maybe you win the lottery, then or you're experiencing so much great pleasure or sensation or joy or happiness. Let's say like a kind of like in a pleasure, happiness. So that is called the suffering of change. So this is so important here. In the Buddhism, especially here in the Jewel Ornament, the Gampopa emphasize, even the so-called joy in samsara is nothing but it's a suffering in the essence. So the essence of this, the suffering of change, because it's impermanent. When we experience something really good, or we gain some, let's say, fame, and you feel so joy and pleasure, but after a few weeks, so nobody cares, or nobody giving you that attention, or you're losing that fame, so that now you start to experience suffering. So that's called the suffering of change. It's impermanent. Even that joy, it changed, so that it creates a suffering, or there is a suffering of impermanence within that joy. So that is called the suffering of change. So second suffering. So in the fifth chapter, I think the Gampopa mostly the emphasize on this suffering of suffering, 𝘓𝘪𝘣𝘦𝘬𝘠. So in this suffering of suffering is all the six realms. For example, the hell realm. The hell realm, the first, they have all pervasive suffering, which is the ignorance or ego, or they are in the dualistic. That is already one suffering, and suffering of suffering. So there is already one suffering. So now additionally, there's another suffering. That's why they call it 𝘓𝘪𝘣𝘦𝘬𝘠, like emphasizing two suffering. The suffering of suffering. There is a all-pervasive suffering, and additionally there is this sixth realm. For example, the hell realm. So there is the 18 different kind of hell. The 8 hot hell, and there are 8 cold hell, and additionally there is a occasional hell, and as well as neighboring hells. So altogether 18 hells are there. So they are going through so much pain, and so I will not go into so detailed into this 18 hell right now, but in the future we will go through it. So, for example, now there is the hungry ghost, for example. It's also one of the 6 realms, and who have already this suffering, all pervasive suffering. Additionally, there is a hungry ghost suffering, So there are this 3 types of the hungry ghost: the outer obscuration to eating and drinking, and inner obscuration, and then there is a general the obscuration to eating and drinking. So these are the suffering of the suffering, and there are the animal realm. They have already the all-pervasive ignorance or ego or dualistic suffering, and additionally they have an animal the suffering, and then the human realm, which is you and I, and we are also in this suffering of suffering, out of 3 suffering, because we have the all-pervasive suffering, and additionally there is the birth suffering, the old age suffering, the sickness suffering, the death suffering, and then there are this what we call the separating from the loved ones. There's also suffering. The meeting with those who are not dear is also suffering. Not finding what we desire is also suffering. So there are, you and I already know there are so many suffering in the human realm. So that is more like a suffering of suffering. And there are, let me see, so there are, for example, the demigod realm, Asura realms suffering, and then the God realm suffering. So the demigods are always, here it says, a jealousy and fighting with the God realm. It's a mental suffering. It's a jealousy of glory of the gods, And in the God realm, they also have suffering, So while they are in a God realm, it's everything so pleasure. So here you can see the 3 sufferings are all there. First of all, the God, no matter any God, so they have an ignorance, they have an ego. So that ignorance, not knowing the truth, that is the all-pervasive suffering. It's already there in the God realm. The second, 𝘓𝘪𝘣𝘦𝘬𝘬, the suffering of change. So while they are having a so good life in the God realm is in the desire realm. So they're enjoying all the God realm desire, let's say. And while they are having this so much pleasure, and that itself is the suffering of change. While they are enjoying, there is an impermanent, because the God realm is not a permanent. It's not there forever. As soon as they are married, as soon as the good karma finish, so they have to change the realm. For example, if somebody is living in a so beautiful place, as soon as they can't pay the rent, they have to move to another apartment. So similarly, the God realm it depends on their good karma. So that's why they're reborn in God realm. So as soon as their good karma finish, so they have to maybe reborn in, you never know, maybe to hell, maybe the animal realm, you never know. So that while enjoying the God desire, it itself is the suffering of change. So now, as soon as their time is coming up, as soon as they will going to die, they start to see, here the Gampopa, the emphasize, so the sign of the death appear when the God are close to death. So For example, here the Gampopa said, like their clothes are, becoming a very ugly, and the garland of flowers are start to kind of fade, and then the sweat in the body, and it's smelly, very bad smell, and then they start to dislike their own place. So those are the signs, and they start to really suffer now. So, and when the gods are close to death, they start to experience the suffering of suffering. So they already have this all pervasive ignorance suffering. So now they are experiencing the additional suffering of death or near death, let's say, and disliking this state of stinky, let's say, they're the body, the smell, and the clothes, and all the garlands of flower, all are stinky, smelling so bad, and that is so great suffering, and they even can see where they will going to reborn. Let's say they are going to reborn in hell. That is a hell of a suffering. So this three type of suffering is always there. So and that three type of suffering is for you and I. Most of the people, maybe this what we call that all pervasive suffering is not that important for now, and it might be important when you are in a kind of higher stage of your spiritual development, so then you are very sensitive toward this very subtlest suffering, let's say. That's a very subtlest. You right now the great emotion, let's say, we are going through so many other things, so that the subtlest all pervasive suffering is not that we can't experience, put it that way. And the suffering of change is also not that important for you and I. And Gampopa didn't emphasize so much in this the jewel ornament. So the whole the meaning here, the Gampopa, why he was emphasizing on this suffering of sixth realm, is that we as a practitioner, we have to meditate or contemplate on this so many level of suffering, and there are everything is suffering in samsara, so that we start to think like how I can liberate myself from these oceans of samsara, and how I can liberate all the sentient beings from these oceans of samsara, because all the sentient beings are once my mother, once my son or daughter, and once my best friend. So right now they're reborn in a different realm, and how I can really help them, how I can liberate them. So that's a bodhicitta, and how I can liberate myself, Uh, so that's kind of the antidote to attachment toward the samsara. So then you really wanted to liberate, not like you think everything is good. I'm enjoying in samsara. So that's why the fifth chapter is pointing, emphasizing on this. The samsara, there is no pleasure. Everything is suffering. Even the pleasure itself is suffering of change. And even you don't feel now any experience, even that itself is suffering of ignorance. So that means 24 hours, 365 days, everything is suffering. So suffering in a sense, not like it's a really like a kind of negative, so we have to think like, oh, I'm in suffering, so that you always start to think suffering, but more like a knowing everything is suffering. So now you have to find the way how to liberate from this suffering, and how to liberate other beings from this suffering. So this is the, I think, essence of the fifth chapter. Thank you for listening.